The military residency match is one of the most confusing parts of becoming a military doctor. Whether you're a recruiter trying to explain it, a medical student about to apply to the process, or just a curious pre-med. Today, we break it all down because I'm here with Lieutenant Colonel Mary Alice Noel, a physician and the Medical Recruiting Brigade Integration Officer. She's here to make sense of the process and show you how the match really works. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Noel.
Yeah, good to see you again, Landon.
Yeah, this is an exciting topic. Just before this, we got started, and there's so many questions, I'm sure, all over the internet. This military match versus the civilian match. And I want to just start right out of the gate, the comparisons, the contrasts. What are the differences between the military and civilian match processes?
So what a lot of people don't know is that it's fairly similar. We designed the military match to look very similar to the civilian match. And I want to dispel the first myth that the Army is going to force you to go into a certain specialty. It's actually not. You're going to go through this match process just like you would on the civilian side and end up matching to a program that you rank and that you choose.
Got it. And so the military then kind of boasts a high number for first choice residency placement, right?
Yeah. So 85% of our participants, and the participants are going to be Army, HPSP, Health Profession Scholarship recipients, or students who are attending the Uniformed Services University, which is the military medical school. They are going to participate in this match, and 85% of our participants for the last few years have gotten their specialty of choice, much higher than the civilian match rates, which is around 50% for specialty of choice. So that's, from a population statistics standpoint, it's a great option.
I've heard some people hesitate about the military residency match because they often assume the training isn't exactly on par with the civilian programs. But from what I've learned, that's just not exactly true. Correct me if I'm wrong, but military residencies are fully accredited, high quality, and they boast a 96% first-time board pass rate across all specialties, which is actually higher than the civilian average. And of course, they're also known for their strong faculty engagement and mentorship. That speaks to the quality of the military residency match, right?
Yes.
How does this process work? Because maybe the audience is interested now.
So the Army match will start earlier than the civilian match. So the computer system opens in July for you to start putting in your preferences for your specialty of choice, and you get to put 5 locations for that specialty of choice. You need to determine your specialty of choice by the end of August, and then it fully closes by mid-October. And in mid-October, you're going to rank your 5 locations that you're interested in for that specialty. If your specialty only has 2 or 3 locations, then you'll also put other specialty options or a transitional year. So during that time of July to October, the Army is going to pay for you with your HPSP, the Health Profession Scholarship. You are going to get to go on a 4-week rotation at your residency program of choice within the military. And that means that, for example, San Antonio is one of our largest training centers. Landon, if you wanted to, we'd fly you down to San Antonio. We'd pay for your hotel, your rental car, your daily food allowance, and you would get fully embedded within that program. I like to use emergency medicine as an example because a lot of our candidates come from like an EMT background, or they have interest in emergency medicine. So you show up at the San Antonio's emergency medicine program, you get fully embedded. You get into their electronic medical record. You're operating as best you can as an intern while you're there. And that gives you a chance to really get exposed to the culture there, the different residents, the people you're going to be working with, the faculty. And if you want to do a second rotation, so that's a 4-week rotation. If you want to do a secondary rotation, you can pay for it on your own. The Army's just not going to cover the cost for transportation. A lot of programs know that HPSP students are trying to do this on their own time. So often there are options to stay with a resident that's in that program or something like that.
Yeah, to establish that timeline better. So this would be as a 4th-year medical student, if I'm correct. That July, the application opens the process, and then through August, closes October 5th. And then for the average civilian match, then I heard that match process is later. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So it's going to close October 15th. And then you're going to get your results in December. And then compared to the civilian match, where the match results come out in mid-March, I think, timeframe.
Got it. So December on the military side versus mid-March. So 3 more months of security for knowing where you're going. And then that 4-week rotation at a military medical center,
So you'll go between that July to October date is when you're doing your audition rotations. So you know how to rank your programs when you have to submit kind of the final ranking.
And really quick, can you further explain what you meant by those 4-week audition rotations?
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to occur typically between the July and October date, where you're going to go to those 4 weeks at a military residency program. And you can also do the unfunded rotations. And on the other side of the match, the program directors are taking everybody who's selected, like I said, emergency medicine. Those emergency medicine program directors, for everybody who's selected emergency medicine, they're going to rank them 1 to however many people apply. And then that's how the match works, right? The computer system does its algorithm, and you end up matching based off of that.
Given that the military match algorithm works differently, are there factors that are weighted differently than the civilian match, like certain board scores, performance ADTs, et cetera?
Right. That's a great question. The way we look at participants in the match is going to be very similar to the civilian programs. We want you to do well in medical school. We want you to pass your step 1 and step 2, first time go. We want you to do well in your clerkships and have good letters from your school about how you performed and integrated into not only the teams you like, but the teams that you have to work in. So maybe you want to go EM, but you don't really enjoy a certain specialty. You still need to engage because that's important for your knowledge and learning. So fully engage. And then additionally, as you're able to do research, as you're able to do any community and volunteer projects, demonstrate leadership. I will say one of the differences is that we're looking at your professionalism. We're looking for how you're going to perform as a military officer. And so making sure that you have something in your packet that's speaking to that, or letters of recommendation that are speaking to that, will be important too. A lot of people get wrapped around the axle about the point system. If you read that on Reddit, one, you don't really have control over the point system whatsoever. There's no way to game it. It's pretty simple. Just do what you need to do to be the most highly qualified applicant that you can be. And I had a great conversation recently with a student who said, well, what if the research is going to take away from my study time for medical school? And I said, you need to be a good student first. So prioritize being a good student. As you're able to do research or volunteer activities on the side, do that. But don't let that take away from the reason why you're at medical school, which is to learn to be a good doctor.
Yeah, it helps to take that step back and just say, be in the right place, right uniform, right time, like we say in the Army. And then for a physician, be that confident doctor. What happens if you don't end up matching? I guess going to the other extreme of that fear, which I think is common.
Sure. So that 15% of people that won't match to their specialty of choice, they are going to have an option to do what on the civilian side, it's called the SOAP. And that process is you're going to get a phone call and they're going to tell you, hey, we have certain specialties and locations that did not fill. That's typically for the Army and the primary care side. So pediatrics, internal medicine, family medicine, sometimes preventive medicine. So if you want to, you can compete for a slot there. Not guaranteed, but you can compete for that. That's in the January timeframe of someone's 4th year after the match is completed. The other option is to do a transitional year internship at one of the major military medical centers. So those transitional year internships are embedded with other amongst other residency programs. And so you get exposure. That whole year is just you kind of going through different residency programs, embedding within their teams and getting the knowledge you need to prescribe Tylenol correctly, get used to being a doctor. And at the end of that year, you get your medical license. The great part about the transitional year also is that you get to reapply for the match a second time. So you get to apply for a PGY2 spot, maybe in that residency that you didn't get initially. And you can continue to build your packet over the continuation of your 4th year of medical school as you start into your residency program. The great news of this is that pretty much everybody is going to match. And so there's a lot of fear out there that 20% of the civilian side doesn't even match to an internship. In the Army, you're going to match. As long as you're a qualified applicant, you should be graduating medical school. We will have a spot for you in a transitional year internship. We also offer prelim general surgery and medicine, but those spots will vary based on kind of what happens with the match that year. So you will get an internship, again, as long as you're qualified, right? Like you haven't had something atrocious happening in medical school, you're going to match and we're going to train you. And you'll get multiple shots at the match if you don't match to your specialty of choice initially.
So with the military version of the SOAP and then the transitional year, the Army provides options, or military in general, I guess. Yeah. Awesome. And then on that note, so I've heard the term general medical officer thrown around, like GMO.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a stigma about I don't want to become a GMO, like that I don't match, or what's that truly mean and how does that fit into the match process?
Yeah. That's a great question. And this is going to vary service to service. So for the Army, a general medical officer has to have a medical license, which means we have to train you at least in a transitional year internship or a prelim general surgery or medicine year. So the GMOs are typically people who do not get, like if they go into the match a second time, they don't get picked up and then they don't choose a SOAP. So then being a general medical officer, or sometimes people choose because they just don't really know what they want to be when they grow up, which is totally fine. So they'll go through their general medical officer tour. Those can be really cool jobs. You can be a flight surgeon and work with helicopter pilots. You can be a battalion surgeon and do lots of really awesome training. You get embedded within your clinics and work with the medics and taking care of soldiers. And you'll have a board certified physician who is there with you in your unit to kind of help you along. So you're not completely alone in those roles. And then you spend about 12 to 24 months doing your GMO job, and then you can apply again to the match again. And in the match, when people have done those, what we call utilization tours, that does add some credibility to your application for the match, that you've been out there, you've taken care of soldiers, you've had some great experiences. And so that adds to your packet even more so.
For sure. Yeah, the military stresses leadership, and there's no better way than to just do it.
Right.
Can I apply to both the military and civilian residencies?
That's a great question. And a lot of people ask that. We're going to have you apply to the military residency programs. And depending on your specialty, you may have an option to apply to civilian programs. The way this breaks down is that, for example, emergency medicine gives two options to go to civilian programs. One of them is going to be through a civilian partnership. The partnership is going to be a program that has a dedicated spot for an Army resident. And those in emergency medicine currently, and again, this is 2025, September 2025, those programs are Medical College of Georgia in Augusta, University of Texas in San Antonio, and Jackson Memorial in Miami are going to have dedicated spots for Army residents. Those are actually going to be in the military match. So you can rank in your top 5 choices. You can actually rank 3 civilian programs if you want to. Now, sometimes those have a little bit more limited slots. And so you have to think about that as you go through the process. But you can match to a civilian partnership out of the military match without even going into the civilian match program. When you do that, you're still getting the benefits of being a resident in the Army. So you're getting paid over $100,000 a year. You're getting full health insurance for you and your family. You're getting time towards your service. And then after you finish that civilian residency, you're going to transition into the military and do a job just like those who went to a military residency. The other way you might end up in a civilian residency program is if I'm just using this as an example, there's 1 to 50 spots for emergency medicine physicians in military residencies or civilian partnerships. You're number 51. We want to train you as an emergency medicine physician, but we don't have a slot for you right now. We're going to tell you in the match that you got a civilian sponsorship, which means you then will go into the National Residency Matching Program, the NRMP, and you will apply for a civilian residency. There are not many people who end up in this option. 95 to 98% of our participants in the match are going to end up in a military residency program. And then there's a few civilian partnerships offered depending on your specialty. But for example, emergency medicine sent 5 last year to the civilian sponsorship route. That does slightly change your obligation if you end up doing a sponsorship, because when the Army is training you, you're technically incurring obligation even when you're at a military residency program. But that's paid back at the same time as your HPSP. So that obligation is 1 year less than the length of your residency. So for emergency medicine, 2 years, that's paid back at the same time as your HPSP. If you do a civilian sponsorship, then that obligation gets added to the end and it's a consecutive obligation. So you would do, if you did emergency medicine, civilian match, you would owe your 4 years of HPSP as a staff physician and then 2 years for that time that you did in a civilian sponsorship. These words, civilian partnership and sponsorship, are really important. And it's very confusing on the internet, which is why we're doing this podcast.
So just to clarify, is the only way I could participate in this civilian match is if I'm selected for a civilian sponsorship slot?
Yeah, exactly. So that's not very many people who end up doing that, but it's important to know that you're going to be in the military match first. And then the Army is going to basically give you permission to participate in the civilian match for that specific specialty. I think the ones that typically have that are going to be emergency medicine, ortho, general surgery, anesthesia. That's what currently exists. Again, whenever you're listening to this podcast, just know that this is the real-time data for the match.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding you correctly, kind of 3 main paths for the military match, the partnerships, and then the sponsorships. Is that
Correct.
the 3 categories? And so that 95 to 98% is just straight military.
Military and the civilian partnerships are included in that as
And
well.
civilian partnerships.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
those sponsorships very select, but it could be the difference of a specialty you love and you feel gravitated towards, but there's just not that spot, or making a sacrifice and picking your second or third choice, or so on down the list.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. And when you do the sponsorship, you also are getting paid. So your peers are going to be making, I think it's like
Huge.
$65,000 to $75,000 a year.
that.
And when you look at the 80-hour work week, that's almost minimum wage, if not lower than minimum wage, because you're working a lot during residency. You're going to be making
Yeah.
over $100,000 a year. You're going to get your full health insurance and benefits of that, and you're still getting time towards service. Those are all benefits of, even if you end up in the civilian sponsorship role, you're getting all those benefits alongside, which if you did it completely civilian, that's a little more challenging on the financial side.
I remember a med student saying he was making $17.80 an hour as a second-year resident.
Yes,
Like,
right.
yeah, those are the numbers.
Yes.
With that being said, is there any other pressing topic that you see the questions being asked by recruiters or students?
I think it's really important to know that you're not alone in this process. Everybody's trying to go through this together. We have now developed the Military Medical Communities, which is a group that meets virtually once a month and will cover different specialties. We just did orthopedic surgery and they had a program director panel. So if you have questions about this, you can sign into those and listen in on how program directors think about the match when we do those panels. And also we're working within Army HPSP to develop some more nodes of connection. I'm happy to do one-on-one phone calls with people as well. If people are thinking about doing HPSP, I know you'll have my contact information in the notes. And so I'm happy for anybody to reach out if they have questions. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes, I'll absolutely leave Dr. Noel's contact info in the description of the video, or if you're listening to this on a podcast service. Military Medical Communities, is this a website they can go to? Do they need to reach out through you? How will they find this?
Yeah, so we can put that in the show notes for the link to sign up for that. And they also host
Perfect.
a website.
Well, in a nutshell, this has been the military match process. Ton of information. Take it one bite at a time. Thank you, Dr. Noel, for explaining this process. With that being said, as always, make each heartbeat count.